All right, so my SEO plugin tells me that numbered lists are good for SEO, and I knew that. That's been the case for a while. So, getting to the party late. Here we go. My first numbered list: 6 tips for your first powerlifting meet. All right, now there's lots of articles about this out there, and they tend to focus on lots of details, checklists on what you should take, and things of that nature. And that's all important. Don't get me wrong, how to eat, what to eat, all that kind of stuff. Again, very important. Not what I want to talk about. I'm talking about some more generalities, some things that I've seen. I have competed in powerlifting. I've trained various powerlifters and taken them to meet. I train a powerlifter currently. And many people show up in my Facebook group and talk about their first powerlifting meet and how they're going to approach it. And I tell them generally don't do that, because I want them to succeed. And the attitude that people take into a lot of their first powerlifting meets is, I hate to say misguided because it sounds more critical than I want to be, right? You can't know what you can't know. And presumably, since I have more experience than they do, I want to be helpful. I want to help them succeed. I wish everybody who went to their first powerlifting meet had a great meet, came back, had fun, got involved in the sport. It's one of the best subcultures I've ever been involved in. And it pains me when I see beginners go have a bad first meet and leave the sport, frequently through no fault of their own. And yes, I know they should just do their own research. At this point, you know what I think about that. There's probably more good information about powerlifting on the web than certainly there's about nutrition or bodybuilding, just because it's an objective sport, right? It's not well, this seems to work, that either you lifted the weight or you didn't, either you succeeded or you didn't. There's nothing outside of that. But it doesn't change the fact that complete newbie powerlifters, I think, should take a different approach to their first meet. So, tip number 1: have fun, get experience, right? It's very common for people to come in and go, oh, I want to make this weight class, and how do I cut weight? And it's my first meet. And the answer is don't. Don't worry about any of that. Just go. Just go compete, right? Don't worry about trying to cut weight or make a weight class. None of that matters in most cases. And I'll qualify that, right? Realistically, you're not going to win. You're not going to set a record for your first meet. Cutting weight has the far more potential to do harm than good, right? Just go compete. Don't mess around with any of that, right? Because it can tank a lot of people's performances. Some people get into real problems with it, depending on what they do. Don't fool around with it. Now, there are exceptions. Every once in a while, you will find some phenom lifter who, at their first meet, has the potential to set records. There's one here in Austin, Texas. Several years ago, she was a amazing bodybuilder, perfect levers. Her mom is a beast powerlifter too. And she had the potential to go to her first meet and basically set all the junior records. She also knew how to weight cut because she competed in bodybuilding. That's the exception. You are realistically not the exception. That's not your goal. Your first meet is to go, have a good meet, have fun, meet some really cool people, and come out of it feeling positive. If you cut weight and it tanks your performance, and you have a bad meet, you're never coming back. So throw all of that out unless you're in the 1/10 of 1% who's going to go and set a record at your first meet. And realistically, you're not. All right, number 2, read the rule book, or at least know the rules, right? I'm a little psychotic, as we all know. I will read the rule book before every one of my lifters, the night before every one of my lifters meets. Even if it's the same, several meets in the same year, and the rule book hasn't changed. I read it every single time because I want to make sure that I didn't miss anything, that I didn't forget anything. Occasionally I find something that I missed. Happened we went to actually a Masters Cup with world records on the lines. There was something about attempt selection I was not aware of. If I had not read the rule book, it would have hurt her meet. And as her coach and her handler on meet day, I won't allow that. At the very least, know the rules. Know the rules of the lifts. especially the commands. This is critical. And other things, like you need to know what equipment is legal and weigh-in procedures. And is it a 24-hour weigh-in? Is it a 2-hour weigh-in? You need to have your membership card. Like all these little things, you need to at least be familiar with the rules of the sport. Because if you don't, you're going to have a bad time. If you have a bad time, you're never going to do it. You're probably not going to do it in their meet. And I don't want to see that, and you don't want to see that either. So that brings me to tip 3. Practice commands before the meet. There's more to it. I would say practice the competition before the meet, which is a poor way of phrasing it. Competition is different than lifting in the gym, right? In the gym, you're in your normal environment with the bar you want, with the rack you want, with the plates you want, with the people that you know, and the environment you're familiar with. When you go to meet, all that goes out the window. You go from squatting in a power rack, usually, again, I'm talking about beginners. I'm talking about those guys that training out of a monolift and already know what they're doing. I'm talking about beginners who may not have access to that. Suddenly you go to squats. You're lifting out of a squat rack. You are standing out in the middle of a platform with nothing around you except for 5 spotters, or 7 if you're bigger, with the head judge staring at you, blaring music, people walking through your line of sight. It's not the same. And the last thing you want to be doing on the platform is having to learn commands, or you need to practice to the best of your ability. And this entails a few things. One is practice commands in training. Okay? Clearly this means you have to know someone who knows what the commands are. You know some powerlifters? Go ask them. Powerlifting is one of the most helpful communities I've ever found. Most powerlifters will go out of their way to help you because they want to see people into the sport. They will know the commands. They can help you with the commands. If not, have someone read the real book. Learn the commands. Go to a meet and watch first, right? Squat in most federations, there's 2 commands. Lift the bar up, come out, you get a squat command, you get a rack command.
Squat! Rack!
Practice that in the gym because you see a lot of weird stuff happen at meets. People start the squat before they get the squat command, red lights. They start going back to the rack before they get the rack command, red lights. Practice. On squats, you can take this further, okay? Do you normally squat in front of a mirror? Whether you know it or not, you are subconsciously using that mirror for cues of things like depth, where you are in space. No mirror in the meet. If it is possible to do safely, face away from the mirror. Face out into the gym. Again, if you can do it safely. You won't have the mirror. Suddenly you're going to have to figure out what am I looking at, right? Where is my head supposed to look? You're going to have to deal with this at the meet. Practice it in the gym. If you cannot do it safely and you cannot face out into the gym for some reason, put paper over the mirror, right? Just bring in a big old sheet of brown paper or something, just so that you don't have the mirror for feedback. If you can get a helper, have them sit where the head judge would sit and give you the verbal and the arm commands. As importantly, get someone who knows what legal depth is. Don't get the average gym jock who's going to tell you that a partial squat is below parallel. Because if you go to meet, you're going to have a bad time. Find a powerlifter if you can. Find a powerlifting gym if you can. Take video. Practice. All right. Same holds for the bench. The bench has 3 commands. Right. You bring the bar out. You get a start, or sometimes usually a start. You lower the bar to the chest. It has to be paused, and that's important. You get a press command, and then you get a rack. There are exceptions. I believe some federations use a bench command instead of start. And I don't know if this is still the case, but at one point, USAPL did not give a press command. The lifter had to make the decision on their own or have their coach call it. And so that's just, but again, this is why you read the rule book. You need to know what the rules are and know whether or not you're waiting for a press command. Ideally, compete at a federation that gives you a press command. It's a lot easier. The same things happen. People will often start their bench before they get the start command. Red lights. They won't pause. Red lights. If you touch and go bench, that's reds. They will finish the bench and do what my old training partner used to call the rep and rack, where you push the bar straight back into the rack. Red lights. That's probably the most common error, and everybody's done it, right? At my lifter's first meet, where I was handling her, I had not coached her. First bench, I watched it happen in slow motion. She brought the bar out, started the bench before the command. It crushed her, and at least a dozen lifters came over and said, I did it too. It's normal, because again, you're in a completely different environment. Don't have your normal cues. You've got people standing around the bar trying to listen for commands and focus on what you're doing. Practice in the gym. And there's two components of that. One is, again, if you're not used to pausing your benches, practice. Even do long pauses, because in the meet, what you think is a long pause will not be very long. Time just dilates in a very strange way. If you're used to bouncing the bar off your chest, or even practice pausing, because that can take 5% off your lifts. And if you don't, you're going to have a bad time. The other thing is, ideally, even as a beginner, I would say have a handler, if for no other reason than to hand off on bench, right? I practice relentlessly with my lifter to make sure that my handoff is the same every time. When we practice commands in the gym, it's as much for her consistency as for mine. Because the first meet she went to, I couldn't hand off. I was on a broken leg. And suddenly she had, as she put it, a strange nutsack in her face. And that threw her off on her first bench. She wasn't used to having some rando standing above her, right? So if you have someone who can consistently hand off for you, have them do that. Ideally, have them come to the meet. At the meet, there will be people to hand off for you, but now that's a variable. Sometimes you control it, sometimes you can't. But practice. To that, let me add, if you aren't going to have a handler who can hand off for you at the meet, you may be better off not getting a handoff, right? Legally, you can bring the bar out on your own. It's usually a little bit easier to have someone help you, but a bad handoff is worse than no handoff. Because if the person handing off doesn't know you, doesn't know how you count it off, doesn't know where you want the bar, puts it in the wrong place, that will probably cause you to miss. So consider, if you're not going to have someone helping you out that can consistently do it, learn to bring the bar out on your own. And even that will take some pounds off the bar because it takes a little bit more energy. So just another consideration. The deadlift, much, much easier. One command. You lift to the top, get a down command. That's it. After you get the bars loaded command. It's the easiest of the lifts command-wise. But even so, if you start to descend before the down command, that's reds. If you don't get your knees locked out, that's reds. If you don't get your shoulders back, that's reds. You need to know this before you go to meet. You need to practice it. And on deadlifts, you can have someone call commands. Ideally, have someone stand in front of you, sit in front of you right about where the head judge would be. They're going to be standing with their arm lifted up, what unfortunately looks like a very awful salute from an old political dictator, and they will be giving you arm commands. Get someone to sit, because again, it's different. If you're used to just deadlifting in open space, or in a rack, or whatever it is, or on a platform, suddenly you're out in the middle of space with this dude sitting in front of you and people walking around you. Practice. Practice your commands. With my lifter, we practice during individual weekly workouts. Also, every Saturday for 6 weeks going to the meet, she does basically a meet mimic. We do the exact same warm-up she's going to do at the meet. We do 6 singles on squat and deadlift and variable 8 to 12 on bench, depending on what goes on. We do them in competition order, bench, squat, deadlift. We do them with full competition commands. My goal, on top of just developing, peaking her, is to put it all on autopilot. Because at the meet, I want her lifting, not thinking. I've seen lifters go to meets and try to learn commands during the warm-ups, or on the platform, even worse. Can it be done? Sure. Is it ideal? No. Find a way to practice commands. To at least, even if it's just for 3 weeks, get some practice with them before your first meet. It will make things go a lot easier. If you're wondering, my sweatshirt changes because I tend to sort of record these in segments because I'm disorganized. So to the practicing commands thing, I guess I would add what is like 3A, which is consider doing a short meet prep. By that, I mean, usually the Thursday before Saturday meet, you go into the gym and you just do the 3 competition exercises. I've done this with every lifter I've trained from back in the day to my current lifter. Thursday, we go in, squat, bench, deadlift, go through the full competition warm-up. Most lifters will go to their final warm-up rep. I take mine a little bit heavier, which has to do with the way I compete her, which is not relevant here. And it's it has a number of purposes. One is it keeps the lifter just kind of loose. Some lifters go very flat if they take too many days off. My specific lifter tends to forget what heavy weights feel like very quickly. And if we don't do this, she's just doesn't look good on the platform. We do a Monday, Tuesday workout that are relatively heavy. Again, this is kind of specific to her and probably more specific to women. Just most, I think, should train Monday, Tuesday, even if it's just kind of a moderate, maybe squat and light deadlifts on Monday, something bench on Tuesday, and then the meet prep. So it's to keep you loose. It's to keep you from going flat. But it's also one last chance to practice competition commands under light weights. So that's all you have to focus on. And that's another reason we do it. Now, there's about a 10-year span where I wasn't coaching anyone or taking one into meet. And I've just sort of recently learned that apparently the whole meet prep thing just got eliminated. People weren't doing it. And I think what happened, and it did a lot of people a lot of harm, I think what happened was heavy geared lifting was very popular during that time. West Side Metal Militia, those guys. And they're just so fucking beat up that they needed a full week off to recover. And now as we've moved back to raws, we've moved back to people that aren't doing, board work with 700 pounds who are just beaten, do the meet prep. It shouldn't take more than like 45 minutes, and most of that is equipment, is changing your shoes. So, like I said, stay loose, stay primed, just sharp, and it's one last chance to practice. All right. Go to the rules meeting. Every meet has a rules meeting at 8 a.m. They will walk you through the rules of the lift, which can vary slightly between federations, but by and large aren't that different. If you have questions, ask. Right? I've coached powerlifters on and off for 15 years now, and I've taken my lifter to meet for 2.5 years. I'm usually the one with the dumb shit questions at the rules meeting because it might be about attempts. I want to know where I should powder my lifter's legs for deadlifts. Ask. Don't be embarrassed. You have to learn. If you have a question, ask. Everybody at the meet is there to not only judge and make sure the meet is run fairly and evenly. People don't realize the judges and the people running the computers and running the meet, they want to see you have a good meet. Ask. Don't ask if they're busy. Be polite. But ask. If you have questions, ask. That brings me to probably the most important bit. Attempts. Okay? So in meet, you always have to give your first attempt. Usually at weigh-in, sometimes earlier, depending on the meet. And they can be changed sometimes. I don't want to get into all of that, so you can change your first attempt. But what's important to realize in powerlifting is your first attempt, once you've taken it, can never be lowered. It can only stay the same or go up, right? And in that vein, if you don't make a single squat, that's a bomb out, and your meet's over. And it happens more often than it should. And it makes me angry when it happens. Because usually It's because someone started too heavily. Again, frequently it's through no fault of theirs because they don't know. I've seen beginners and have coaches start them too heavy and they bomb, and that's a lifter loss to the sport. And it bums me out because it shouldn't happen. It shouldn't ever happen for a beginner. It's different when you get to higher levels and there's more going involved. For a beginner, I would think there should never be a bomb out. And here's how you should do it. When you read articles about attempt selection, here's sort of the traditional approach. First attempt, 87 to 90% of your best. Second attempt, it depends, 95, 97% of your max. Third attempt, 100 to 103%, going for a new PR. As a beginner, don't do that. Don't ever do that. It's fine for advanced athletes who know how things are going to go. As a beginner, don't do that. For your first attempt, always go lighter than heavier. Always. Because there's more to be gained by going lighter and being able to move up than by going too heavy. Because if you start too heavy and can't make that lift, you risk bombing out. If you go lighter, number of things. Well, one, you're more likely to make it. Two, you get on the board, right? That should be the first, the goal of your first squat is just to get on the board. That way you won't bomb out. You might bomb out on bench, but the same rules will apply. Get on the board first. And realize nobody cares what your first attempt is, except you, right? All they see is the best you did for the day. It gives a shit what your first attempt was. Take the bar. It gives a shit, except you. And I dare say it's men more so than women that tend to pick too heavy of a first attempt. But again, the environment's changed. You're not in your normal gym, your normal environment. You've got all these things. You're having to think about the commands. Even if you practice them, the last thing you need to think about is the weight on your back. Start at 85%. I read a really great article last year about attempts, and I couldn't find it for the life of me right now. And it was a guy, and he says, I typically start at 87%. He's like, but I know a coach starts all his lifters at 85%. To me, that seems low, but you know what? None of them have ever missed their first attempt. That should be the goal. Pick a weight that you could do a set of 5 on a bad day. Your first attempt should feel like a final warm-up. And I'll do another video on how I approach warming up. Like I said, make it light. Get on the board. Just get on the board. Get a successful lift in because success breeds success. Get positive momentum because you made that lift. Sink it deeper than you normally would. It's light, right? Sink it. And something that doesn't get talked about is whether they realize it or not. Once a judge sees a lifter make a lift, mentally they see that lifter as a lifter who makes lifts. Does that sentence make sense? If they see you go super deep on your first one, mentally they'll carry that in your second attempt and go, oh yeah, this guy goes deep. Because you've established that you're a lifter who does that. By doing this, by starting light, you can always go up, right? Get on the board, then you can go up a little bit. And I might say for most people, second, you can go 87, start at 85. So that's about a best set of 5. Go to your best triple. It's about 90%. Maybe finish at your best double, 95%. Now the hardheads will go, but you left weight on the platform. You're a beginner. Your goal is not to set records. It's great if you do, if you can set PRs, but which would you rather? Go for broke and have a shitty meet because you missed 2 of 3 attempts, or come out of there having made 3 out of 3. There's always another meet down the road. Your first meet, it's not about that. And the same rules apply for the bench. Start even lighter there, and I'll tell you why. The pause. If you don't regularly pause in the gym, A, figure your strength can be 5% down if you are pausing, but B, most lifters train squats and bench on different days. My lifter trains them all on the same day for 6 weeks. Heavy squats wear out the shoulder girdle a little bit, and your shoulders may be a little bit more tired going into bench. If you haven't trained that way in the gym, your bench numbers will be a little bit down. Start light. Get on the board. Make the lift. Then you can go up. Deadlifts, harder to say. Some people get a lot on meet day on their deadlifts just out of adrenaline, and others don't. I still would say on your first deadlift, again, go conservative. What do you have to lose? You deadlift. You can make bigger jumps. You can add, just throw weight on the bar and just let go beast mode on it. Get on the board. Get a lift in, because by the time you've gotten to deadlifts, if you get your first lift in, you've made a total. You've finished a meet. Even if you tank your second and third, which you shouldn't, you've had a successful meet because you finished it. That's the goal. So nobody cares what your first attempt is. Start conservatively, then you can move up from there. Get on the board, get success, then you can move up from there. So just to keep beating this dead horse about the importance of starting light, right? When you go to meet, you're going to be nervous. You're going to be anxious. My lifter has been competing for 2.5 years now. She's done 10 or 11 meets. She still gets nervous at the meet. I get more nervous, right? And I'm of the opinion that if you as a coach care about your athlete, you should be more anxious than they are. Because if I've done my job and she's prepared, she's just there to compete. I'm worried about everything else. I'm worried, did I pick her attempts correctly? Did I prepare her correctly? That's a different video, all the stuff I do at a meet that leaves me more tired than she does. So you're going to be nervous. You're going to be thinking about everything I've talked about in this video. When you make your first, am I going to get on the board? Am I going to bomb out? That's probably a lot of what's going through your mind. Am I deep enough? Am I this? Once you make your first attempt, you'll relax. And your second attempt will probably be easier than your first, even though it's at a heavier weight, because you're relaxed. Now, when I say relaxed, right, I don't mean don't get tight under the bar. I don't mean anything. I mean mentally relaxed. Because now, instead of thinking half about the lift and half about am I going to miss it and am I going to bomb out, you can not worry about that part of your brain worrying about bombing out. And you're relaxed. That's why success breeds success. Get your first lift in, whatever it takes. If that means going 80%, get your first lift in. Then you can relax, then you can add weight. I think I've probably made this point. Put the ego away, start light, move up from there. Finally, number 6. Get feedback, right? Even if you do all of this, you might get red lights. Usually on squats, people get nervous. Even with light weights, they get anxious, they cut depth. That's probably the most standard mistake. Everything's different. But if you get reds, number one, it is what it is. Everyone's gotten reds. Just listen to a podcast by Matt Gary and his wife. She is a experienced competitor, world record holder. She bombed out of a meet. Just one of those things that happens. Red lights happen to everybody. Missed lifts happen to everybody. If it happens, go ask the judges politely why. People don't realize, I think a lot of lifters don't realize that they can do that. So the judges are not only to judge the event and keep it fair and safe and evenly judged. They want to see everyone have their best meet. They will tell you what happened that gave you red lights. Maybe it was depth. Maybe it was soft knees on squats, which means you didn't quite get locked out. Could be a number of things. But ask, because if you don't ask, you won't know. You now have 10 minutes or so between your lifts to go fix it, or at least think about it. So I mentioned earlier in this video how my current lifter at her first meet missed her first bench. She didn't wait for the bench command. Completely unknown environment, hadn't practiced commands. So I was handling her, but I had not been coaching her. And as she put it, had an unknown nutsack in her face. But she also had not been practicing getting a handoff. She trained alone. So having seen that, and I didn't need to ask the judges what was wrong. I know what was wrong. I took her to the warm-up room, and I asked a coach who wasn't currently busy handling a lifter, if he could let her practice. And we put a moderate weight on the bar. He gave her a handoff. I gave her commands. We did 2 or 3 reps like that. Went back. She crushed her second. She made a PR on her third. That's what you may have the potential to do. When you get reds, find out why. At least think about what you can change. And if you have a chance, practice. Because you got about 10 minutes between lifts. Took my lift through to meet one time. And for whatever reason, her first lift got called on depth. I'm not sure what was going on. I now had 10 minutes to basically correct her depth. I ran her to the warm-up room, and I put her through 5 quick singles, pyramiding up. I started light and had her going deeper than she was used to. And it worked. Works for her. She trains on a very short rep. Wouldn't work for everybody, but we had 10 minutes and I had to fix it, so I fixed it. Get the feedback. Do that on all 3 lifts. If you get reds, politely ask why. Or ask another lifter for feedback. The judges are usually a better choice, but if the judge says fix this or this is the problem, lifters at meets, assuming they're not busy, or their handlers, very, very helpful. Again, it's a very supportive community by and large. Tell them, hey, the judge told me this. Can you help me fix it before my next attempt? Assuming they're, like, don't bother them if they're lifting or getting ready. But if they're free, ask. And they'll probably be able to help you because they want to see everybody succeed and continue to compete too. So let's wrap up. 6 tips for your first powerlifting meet. 1, just go to have fun and get experience. Don't cut weight. Don't worry about setting records. Your goal is to go, get through the meet, and have a successful meet. And that's it. 2, read the rule book or know the rules. Find someone who knows the rules. Make sure your equipment is legal. Make sure you have your membership card. Make sure you know when the weigh-ins are, all that kind of stuff. Number 3, practice commands before the meet. That's probably one of the most important because you don't need to be figuring them out under meet conditions. Find someone who knows the commands, get them to practice with at least a few workouts. I would personally say do it in workouts where you train squat, bench, deadlift all in the same workout for the reasons I already talked about. But if you can't do that, practice. For bench, if you're going to have a guy go with it, practice the handoff. Number 4, go to the rules meeting. If you have questions, ask. Nobody thinks you're dumb for not knowing what you won't know if you don't ask. It exists for you to ask questions if you're unclear. Number 5, the most important, be conservative in your attempts. Make your first attempt something you could do without even thinking about it. Because you will be thinking about the judge, the commands, the spotters, where your head goes, all this other stuff that you've never practiced. You can't be thinking about how heavy the weight is. Pick a way that you could do 5 in your sleep. Make it a final warm-up rep. I cannot emphasize this enough and go up from there. Same thing on bench. Even if you only make 1 out of 3 lifts on each lift, you've still gotten a total. That's the goal. Finally, get feedback as needed. Number 6. If you get red lights, and it happens to everyone, go ask the judges why. Find out what went wrong. Maybe you can fix it between lifts, and if not, you can fix it for the next meet. Because every meet where something goes wrong, successful meets are great. My lifters had 1 9 out of 9, 27 white lights. That's the dream. It doesn't happen often. Successful meets are great. But when things go wrong, you have the potential to learn and fix it so that next time that goes right and something else goes wrong, and that's how you get better. And that's my first numbered list. 6 tips for your first powerlifting meet.